Hey guys, welcome to week 5 rundown. We are here with Pastor Daniel talking about greed.
She will keep us on time. Start the timer. There we go.
So I don't know if you know this, but the very first time I ever heard a sermon about tithing
Okay.
was when you were a youth pastor. Do you
Do
remember
youth
this?
pastors preach on tithing?
Well,
I guess I did.
You got to preach on a Sunday evening, and it was the first time I'd ever heard a message about money and why you're supposed to tithe and all of these things. It was the first time that I really started to understand about generosity and giving. So tell us, what does that have to do with anything with greed?
Well, wow. One, that was probably 18 years ago. That was like 18 years ago. So the weekly recap here from the sermon basically was that we think that, well, looking through the scripture, generosity is what really breaks that stronghold in your life, that greed in your life. And we're all greedy, right? I mean, we talked about this as kids. Kids grow up going, that's mine, I want. And, where do they learn that from? I mean, no, it's in our nature to be that greedy. So one way to combat greed is to be generous. And then when you're generous and like I talked about this week in a sermon, if you keep your hands open, God can put in your hands and he can also send it out to bless other people. He blesses you to be a blessing to other people. So the more I'm generous to people, the more I give away, I realize more how God provides for me. Therefore, I get content knowing that he will provide. And it kind of chops away at the greed in our heart and our life.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about your kids. And I think somebody else mentioned this a minute ago, but how you talk about we're born greedy and our kids are always, that's mine or she took that. I remember growing up, my sister would put our Kool-Aid glasses side by side and she would get down eye level and measure to see which one of us had more Kool-Aid. I mean, it was that intense to make sure that somebody didn't have more than me. Mm-hmm. How do you fix that or prevent that with your own kids?
That's very easy. It's called a belt. You just get a belt, and it works,
Done.
right? Done. Next
now
question.
Now we know the antidote to greed.
Man, I think it's one of the biggest challenges because I'm the same way. Like, hey, they have more than me, or now it's like, well, they get to stay up later than I get to stay up,
Right.
and like, but how's it my younger brother? I'm 3 years older, get the same amount of time as I get. And I always go back and say, listen, fairness lost itself in the garden, and there's nothing any fair anymore. Right. And they always laugh at when I say that. But I think one of the things really is. That is a thing to teach, but you model it. Mm-hmm. You model it as a mom and dad. And when they start seeing mom and dad, that mom and dad was generous, that mom and dad stopped and blessed someone, invite them in. Don't keep opportunities to bless other people away from your children and get them involved in that. When they're like, hey, we're going to go buy this family meals and I want you guys to take it to their door, knock and give it to them.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this, Dad? Because they don't have anything. Oh, wow, you mean there's people that don't have stuff? Because sometimes it's so easy to miss, like, when you're always being provided for, that there's people who don't have it. So I would invite the kids in. Now, does that fix it overnight? Absolutely not. It doesn't. We're still big kids, right? We still struggle. But I think when they see it in mom and dad, if they see mom and dad always complaining about money, complaining they're poor, complaining they have nothing, greed, or they hold on to it, they're stingy, or mom and dad's are talking about the bigger, better. Someday I'll have this, and I really wish I had this. Then we instill that into our children. But if they see a mom and dad, hey, we're going to the grocery store. Wow, we're going to buy groceries. What for? Because this young family needs it. Wait, what? We get to do that. So the best way is to model it for your children.
Yeah, that's so good. It's all about perspective anyway. I mean, you think about when, kids are like, well, I wish I had these shoes or I wish I had that. And there are so many people out there that wish they had what you have. And how are you being a good steward of the things that you already have? Mm-hmm. And it is that concept of, the more that you have, you think you're going to be happy, but it's more money, more problems, right?
That's right.
It's not,
Biggie Small, this is a great theologian. More money, no problem.
Well, and you talked about Paul and how he learned to be content in abundance or in nothing. And I think that's the place that we have to get to. And so you talked about how generosity really demonstrates your faith. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, if I don't want to give, if I have any resource, and you don't have, really the thing is you don't have to have a lot of money or a lot of resources to be greedy. I mean, you could be greedy with just a little bit.
That's true.
So when I'm holding on to it, one way that generosity, and you said it combats greed, right? Is that the question? Mm-hmm. How does it?
Demonstrates faith.
Demonstrates faith. So when I have something in my hand, the moment I get it, I want to hold it. I never forget, I was sitting here and when we got married, I just popped in my head, we had, through all the gifts that was given to us at our wedding, this is 1999, I had $700 in our checking account. I had never seen $700 in my life. And I thought, are you kidding me? $700 in my checking account. I mean, literally at that point, I thought, I've never seen that much money in my life. Like, I couldn't believe it had $7. And I was reminded too that we had some missionaries come into the church, and they wanted to build a building. And they had this sheet of paper out, and this was when it really hit for me. This would have been 6 months after we were married. It really hit me. We had a sheet of paper, and they had blocks on it. And for every blocks that were colored in, gave a portion to build in the church. And so they try to get the box colored in. So I think maybe Joe Single does that now. You're trying to get out of debt, color in the car, color into it. And so they were doing this back. This was 20 years ago. And I was leaving church, and I watched all these people that are very wealthy walk right by and either not color it or put one block. And I looked at these missionaries, these Filipino missionaries. They were sitting there, and I walked by, and I just felt just overwhelmed, impressed. You know what? We're going to do this. And I took that thing and I colored in, and it was at that point, I think I remember, it was 2 weeks of my salary, and my whole salary to do that. And I went and told my wife. I told her, I said, honey, I can't go spend 2 weeks on the mission field because of the job right now, but we can give 2 weeks of our work towards the mission field. And it was at that moment that really just turned in me to go, you know what? I'm just going to trust. I'm just going to trust. I had student loan. I was sitting there trying to buy a mobile home, and it was 2 weeks of my salary. And I said, you know what? God, I trust you. And so what it does is generosity says, God, as you put in, I'm going to trust you that you will continue to provide. But the moment that God gives you a little bit, that $700 or that 2 weeks that you had or that whatever, you want to hold into it. And now you put trust in you keeping it.
Right.
And it ain't yours.
Right.
It is not yours. So it breaks the mold of your faith. And that's really what tithing is about.
Right.
Tithing is a test. So many people get caught up in tithing. Churches want my money, blah, 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 blah. And usually people say that are really greedy. I'm not being mean to you, but people say, and I don't mean it's mean, they just don't know what it means to tithe.
Right.
It's just a test. God's going to test your heart. Think about it. How much of your time is like how you want to make money, spend money, save money, and do with it. Kids' college, groceries, electric bills. I mean, pay raise. Do I have enough? Do I get a stimulus package? Right now in the middle of the stimulus stuff, am I going to make anything? Whoever wins or not win the election. Your mind is it competes with your heart. And God says, no, that's what I want. So I'm going to test it.
Yep.
Just test it. And every time you get paid, and I get paid, or every time any resource comes in our hands, God's like, I'm going to test you and see what you're going to do with it.
Yep.
And so God blesses you to be a blessing to others.
And that's so good. And that reminds me of, I shared how that message that you preached, the first time I'd really understood about tithes and offerings, how many years ago?
It's like 18 years.
A long time ago. We're not that old, though. We were babies 18 years ago. But I remember
21, 28 here.
Soon after that, there were some missionaries who had come to church, and Adam and I decided that we wanted to give. And we were living on one salary at the time. I was a stay-at-home mom, and we did not have $200 extra to give, but we felt like that's what we were supposed to give. So we wrote the check and we gave. And do you know that these are the old days when you got mail, like real mail and not just junk mail? We got a card in the mail a few weeks later, and it was a check from one of the church members, and guess how much it was?
The exact amount you gave to the mission.
It was $200. And we just boo-hooed because you're right, it is a test.
You boo-hoo all the time,
Terry. I boo-hoo all the time anyway.
We're so much alike, we cry all the time. Like,
but it is that test of your heart.
Did it not build your faith?
Are you going to trust that I'm going to take care of you? And did he not? Of course.
And then the next time he said do it, it wasn't even thought.
There was no thought.
That's why I'm saying in the sermon, there's nothing that's built my faith more than watching God provide when he tells you to give.
100%. So what would you say to everybody watching today to do this week?
I would encourage you, pray and say, God, I want to keep my hands open, and who this week, or what family this week, or what organization this week, it could be an organization that you are moving in that you want me to bless.
Yeah.
And listen, that's the thing. So many people put some dollar amount on it. It's not about a dollar amount.
Right.
I mean, you know how long if just a Starbucks card goes to somebody? Just to bless, that's $5, $5.
Yes.
A meal. I mean, anything that you can do to bless someone. And so you don't have to have a lot to be a blessing to people. So just bless them.
Absolutely. So go be a blessing.
Go be a blessing.
All right. See y'all.